Pesach, and welcome to Sabbath Collective, a community of people that connect to a Hebraic worldview of scriptures. Last night I posted on the Passover Seder experience, and tonight we'll look at the connections in resurrection, worship, and doubt. And you don't oftentimes hear those three words together, but tonight we're going to look at those three words together: resurrection, worship, and doubt. Hey, Jules, good to see you. Mikkel, great to see you. If you want to follow along, we're actually going to be looking at a chapter Matthew 28, and I'm going to be using the version of scriptures called the Complete Jewish Version. And you can get that online at studylight.org or Blue Letter Bible, or even just Google Complete Jewish Version. And we're going to be reading Matthew 28 together. So just a little bit of background on this text. Beth, good to see you, honey. Shabbat Shalom. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Just a little bit of background about this Matthew 28 text. Yeshua had been marginalized by the corrupt government and religious leaders that sided with those leaders. So there was a corrupt government, and yes, we're talking about not today. There's a corrupt government, and there's religious leaders that sided with those corrupt government leaders, thinking that it would sort of further their cause. And in this mix, Yeshua is falsely accused and then killed on a gruesome instrument of capital punishment as an enemy of the state. Hey, Rai, good to see you, son. Shabbat Shalom in Taiwan, as an enemy of the state. So it was Passover, so his body was actually quickly put in a tomb. And then in Matthew chapter 28, again, if you want to kind of follow along with me, after Shabbat, this is verse 1, as the next day was dawning, Miriam of Magdala and the other Miriam went to see the grave. Suddenly there was a violent earthquake, for an angel of Adonai came down from heaven, rolled away the stone, and sat on it. Now, here's the thing, and we get this picture a lot. We see all kinds of interpretations of what this would be. But if we just think about it for a second here we just read, an angel of Adonai comes down from heaven, rolls away the stone, and sits on it. Now, this story has been sort of dulled from familiarity, but let's really connect to it. Evelyn, good to see you. Hey, Teresa, good to see you too. And O'Dane, I think I saw you sign on as well. Good to see everyone. Again, familiarity kind of dulls what this story is really saying. So let's look at this like we've never heard it before, which was actually how those present would have related to it. It's not every day you see angels rolling away big stones and then kind of hanging out. So verse 3, it continues. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so terrified at him that they trembled and became like dead men. Verse 5, but the angel said to the women, don't be afraid. I know you are looking for Yeshua, who was executed on the stake. He is not here, because he has been raised, just as he said. Come and look at the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell the Talmudim, this means disciples, he has been raised from the dead, and now he is going to the Galil, or Galilee as we say, ahead of you. You will see him there. Now I have told you. And then in verse 8, it says, so they left the tomb quickly, frightened, yet filled with joy. Yeah. Of course, they'd be a little bit frightened after seeing this big, radiant angel. And then the text goes on and says, and they ran to give the news to his Talmudim. So we see Miriam and Miriam, the two Marys, see this experience. And it says that they're frightened, yet filled with joy. And they go and give the news to the other disciples as they were told to. Verse 9, if you want to continue reading with me. Hey, Nicole, good to see you from Costa Rica. Suddenly, Yeshua met them and said, Shalom. They came up and took a hold of his feet as they fell down in front of him. Then Yeshua said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and they will see me there." So first they see an angel, and then they see Yeshua himself. Keep in mind, they watched him die. They saw as his body went into the tomb, and now they see him alive. And he says again, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to the Galilee, and they will see me there." Now, the verses continue here and has some. His appearance was like lightning. I wonder if there was thunder. I've never seen one without the other. Oh yeah, that's cool. And lightning and thunder too. From is a Hebraic idiom that always has to do with this miraculous power. So I'll bet you it was too. So then we have, the text goes on, some manipulative politician stuff that happens in order to keep the people in fear so they can continue to control them. In fear so that they'll be afraid and they won't rise up. And of course, we can understand what that looks like. We're all very familiar with what that looks like, and I don't need to chase a rabbit on that. So let's continue in verse 16. So the 11 Talmudim went to the hill in the Galilee where Yeshua had told them to go. In verse 17, it says, when they saw him, they prostrated themselves before him. Now, this literally meant that they hit the ground, and this is a posture of honor. In fact, a lot of versions of the Bible use the word worship here. They worshiped. And the verse goes on and says, but some hesitated. And some versions use the word doubted. So verse 17, when they saw him, when his followers saw Yeshua, who was risen from the dead, they prostrated themselves before him. Again, a posture of honor and of worship, but some hesitated or doubted. And we're going to get into this in a bit. Verse 18, Yeshua came and talked with them. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make people from all nations into Talmudim, immersing them into the reality of the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I will be with you always, even until the end of the age. That's chapter 28. Now, this story, hey Melissa, good to see you. Hey Danielle, great to have you join us. This story really defies our rational minds, doesn't it? Although, I'm talking about us as humans reading about angels and busting open big tombs and people who were dead are no longer dead and they're talking to you. And this defies everything that we've ever experienced in our lives, doesn't it? Just like the people who were experiencing it. Although, that hasn't stopped centuries of theologians and preachers from trying to normalize this miracle so that our minds will kind of accept it. When I was younger, the normal Easter Sunday in churches was that we would put actors in tombs on stages and then have them bust out of the cardboard rocks with a laser light show singing a rousing anthem with modulations and, of course, some drums. But no matter how many of those plays we see, it's not normal. Resurrection from the dead is not a normal thing. As much as we try to make it seem like it's completely normal, it's the opposite of normal. It's the inspired human retelling of a mystical and quite supernatural experience. And for some reason, we want to normalize the miraculous, these gray areas, the intangibles of Scripture, so we can manage and control them. Barbara Brown Taylor writes, and I'm quoting, "Give us a passage of Scripture, and we will put on our thinking caps, doing our best to decipher the symbols, read between the lines, and come up with the encoded message that Jesus or Luke or God has hidden in the passage for us to find." The idea seems to be that the story itself is chiefly a suitcase for conveying the meaning inside of it. Discern the content of the story, and you do not have to go rummaging around inside of it every time it comes up. Instead, you can pull the meaning out of it and place it neatly folded in a drawer where you can find it the next time you need it. End of quote. Barbara Brown Taylor, of course, amazing. But this is so true, isn't it? This is the bedrock of the Greek Western thinking church, which of course is the opposite of the Hebraic way of relating to scriptures. But it's what we Westerners were taught to do by our churches. Put everything in a neat folded pile, and it only means the one thing. Which is why when we can't relate to a text in that one and only same way we have been taught, when we have a kind of tension in it, a questioning of it, or maybe even seeing it from a completely different perspective, possibly we have a double-sided emotional response, we actually start to think we've lost our faith. Hey, Deb, good to see you. Great to have you join us, my sister. And that line of thinking is tragic at any time, but especially now, in this time of our virus changed world, when the very foundations of what we thought were unshakable in our world are not only shaking, they're crumbling. So we need to accept and embrace the tensions, the dualities in the resurrection and in our faith. So, how about we do this? Let's connect to the humans that we read about as this story is happening. We read that two women go to the tomb and it's empty. And there's a brilliant angel that speaks to them. He's not here. He's been raised from the dead. Tell the other disciples he's going ahead of you to Galilee where you will see him. Now, we see a normal human tension here in verse 8, of one that you and I would both feel if we were in this position. It says, so they left the tomb quickly. Again, this is the two Miriams. So they left the tomb quickly, frightened, yet filled with joy. And they ran to give the news to his Talmudim, or his disciples. So we see here a very normal response. They left quickly, frightened, yet filled with joy. Here we see a two-sided coin. Frightened, yet filled with joy. All the while doing what they were supposed to be doing, telling the others. We Greek thinkers would demand to understand everything before we would do anything. And we certainly wouldn't accept the apparent contradiction of fear and joy, because the way we're taught to think is either or. Either it's fear or it's joy, but you can't have both. We would possibly say maybe they were first frightened, but then they understood, and that's what was really going on here, and then they were joyful, because nobody can do something if they don't understand it. Well, the women then meet Yeshua, who say to them, Shalom, don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. When they all then get together and Yeshua is there with them, here's another verse that we see where this tension, this normal human tension of two things going on at exactly the same time, and how that's actually very normal. Verse 17, when they saw him, and this is all of the Talmudim who had gathered at this mountain, when they saw him, they prostrated themselves before him, but some hesitated. Look at this again. When they saw him, this is the risen Lord, the Messiah, the rabbi that they followed, that they learned from, that they ate with, that they slept with, that they watched die, and that they watched put in the tomb. Now they gather again and they see him, and they prostrate themselves before him, meaning they lay down on the ground before him, worship. But then it says, but some hesitated. So now they're worshiping and they're hesitating. The people gather. Now, scholars think different numbers here. Some scholars think that there's a lot of people, hundreds. Some people think maybe it was just a few that they were talking about. But whoever it was, they were followers of Yeshua. They're seeing him alive again. They gather, they see the dead Yeshua HaMashiach, the Messiah, and they worship him. But some, it says, doubted. Now, this is a Greek word that's very clear. It's the Greek word edistensen, and it means doubted from the Greek verb distazo, which means to waver, to hesitate, to be uncertain in opinion. And so this is a very straightforward word. This doesn't have some other meaning where they're saying, oh, maybe we're a little unsure. They are completely uncertain in opinion. They hesitate. They kind of push pause and say, yo, wait, what's happening right now? Now, our Greek mindset would ask, how could they worship with doubt? Wait, you mean they worshiped him? They laid down on the ground and worshiped him and showed him this physical sign of worship, but at the same time they were hesitant and they doubted? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever been doing something that you know is the right thing to do, but at the same exact moment feel this tension of doubt? Let me see if you thumbs up to if you felt this same exact thing. I would definitely be one that hesitates, Ryan, saying it doesn't make any sense. Again, very true. I don't know about you all, but I've never seen a dead person come back to life. And even though Yeshua talked about it, and even though that some of them had experienced Lazarus, they watched him die this awful death. They were heartbroken, they were afraid, they were scattered, and now all of a sudden, here he is. It's not a familiar experience, right? Not at all. The opposite. Beth says worship with doubt is the last 6 years of my life. Oh, that's good, Beth. Worship with doubt, right? It's very much a part of our faith walk. So how could they worship with doubt? It's such a good question, and one that we need to embrace and accept. Oswald Chambers says, doubt is not always a sign that a man is wrong. It may be a sign that he is thinking. Read that one more time to yourself. It's so good, as all Oswald Chambers' words are. It may be a sign that you're thinking. This problem, actually, in the Hebraic worldview, is no problem at all. Matthew pays no further attention to this detail. And Yeshua, the story shows us, never skips a beat at what's going on. So Yeshua doesn't kind of, hey, Glendalee, good to see you, honey. Yeshua doesn't see that they're worshiping and at the same time they're doubting, they're hesitating. And by the way, it must have been obvious because Matthew isn't God and it's recorded that they were hesitant, okay, doubting. Yeshua never even takes a pause at what's going on. He doesn't sympathize with them and says, oh, you poor people, you've been through so much, you probably need a hug. Take some time to wrap your brain around the fact that this is me risen from the dead after all this pain that we just went through. Is there something I can say to make you get some mental clarity here? See, this is Greek thinking, right? It's not Hebraic thinking. No, Jesus doesn't say any of that. No attention is paid to this dynamic in the group at all. Some worshiped, some doubted, some did it at the same exact time. This is what happens in people, in humans, that wrestle with the unnatural, supernatural. Let me say that again. This is what happens in people that wrestle with the unnatural, supernatural. Worship and doubt in the individual and in the collective. This is what our faith community should look like. Yeshua goes right on telling his disciples what to do, even though they have doubt and at the same time they're worshiping. He says, go make other disciples. Teach them my teachings. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like in some way, hey, Phoebe, good to see you? You were a hypocrite? Has the Western church thinking sort of made you feel like it was all or nothing? Like we're ride or die, all worship and no doubt. And if we have any doubt at all, it means that we're not really worshiping. Have you ever felt guilty even when you were trying to do something, the good thing to do, but then there were these other emotions and thoughts? Have you ever felt like you were maybe a terrible follower of Yeshua? But yeah, here's an example that the very people that were closest to him had that very same response. Aaron says, always. Glendalee says, yes. Always, right? This is our human response. And again, this is our response to the unnatural, supernatural, of course. So he goes right on telling his disciples what to do. Go make other disciples, teach them my teachings. Just like the women were obedient and going to tell the others, he's risen, as they had fear and joy. Remember, their tension was fear and joy. So did the Talmudim. That's because doubt or fear, they don't really matter. What matters is the doing part. It's perfectly all right to question things, to wrestle through things, to hold space for the emotions that one is feeling. I'm not suggesting denial. I'm suggesting a full embracing of them all. There's beauty in that place of tension. It's acceptable, in fact, even encouraged in the Hebraic faith community, not in the Western church, but in our roots. It certainly is. Faith said yes, and even as they twist the messages, we're supposed to go that way with them and not question that either. Absolutely, Faith. And you know what? You know what really hit me when I was preparing this teaching was how sad it is that people try to dull our senses concerning the supernatural. They try to make it so familiar that it dulls the supernatural part. And that's so we all just say, oh, yeah, he raised from the dead. Oh, yeah, he healed the sick. Oh, yeah, he forgives. He loves everyone. He came willingly, as if we're robots. The whole point is that it's supernatural. So we're always going to have this emotional response. That means we're actually connecting to the miraculous in the way that his followers did. Aaron says the all or nothing is promoted. Sorry, I have a fly, but I'm not that quick. Aaron says the all or nothing is promoted. It cultivates fear and doubt as a form of control. Absolutely. And what it also kind of says, I think, which we've all felt this, is if you don't believe it this way, if you question it, then you're not really a follower. And again, that puts more fear in us, which is extremely sad. So let's take a look at this. Doubt and fear are an acceptable part of the faith process. What is not acceptable is waiting for doubt or fear to go away before you do the good thing. And by the way, these next couple paintings in the background are from our friend Mako Fujimura, who does some really beautiful, mystical, supernatural interpretations in his art. Frankly, Yeshua doesn't care if his disciples have lingering hesitations or theological questions about these events, but he does care that they get going with his mission. So we can acknowledge the sacred, we can connect with the love, and we can be hesitant and even doubt all at the same time. When my granddaughter was born, I completely connected to the sacred of that moment. It was a mystical experience so overwhelming that I can barely put it into words. To see my son and my daughter-in-law and to see them with their newborn and to feel what they just went through, I still can't even explain what I felt. Yet, at the same time as I felt this unbelievable joy and love and beholding of the miraculous, and by the way, I felt the same way when I gave birth to my two sons, I doubted. I doubted the world she would live in. I doubted the food she would eat, the air she would breathe, the ocean she would swim in, the water she would drink. The sacred and the doubt all in one because I love so much. I want everything perfect, as every parent and grandparent has always done. So there's this unbelievable connection to the supernatural and to love and to the sacredness of that moment at the same time as there's fear and doubt. I remember at one of the weddings that I officiated a couple years ago, I always go back into both the bride and the groom's dressing room to pray with them right before the ceremony. And the bride, who'd been through an awful lot of pain in her life, when I went in to pray for her, she asked all of her bridesmaids to leave the room. And she said to me, "You know, everyone says don't do this if you have doubts. It's all anyone's saying to me this morning and this week. But I doubt that he won't ever break my heart." Double negative there, but this is what she said. "I doubt that he won't ever break my heart. But there's something in me that at the same time chooses to love, to take these vows in front of God and everyone, to believe in him and in myself, even as I have these doubts." And then she looked at me, and I'll never forget, and she said, "Can I have both?" Yes, we can. Yes, we can. In these contexts, doubt is not a deficiency. It's a declaration that we have glimpsed the divine and touched the transcendent, and we feel and see the tensions. Aaron is saying, how do you reconcile when the fear or doubt is something crippling or debilitating? Is that when you push through or wait for grace to help? Yes. Yes and yes. It's basically whatever happens is what's supposed to happen. So if you don't feel that grace rush in that kind of gives you the ability to keep moving, then we know that we're always doing the right thing when we keep moving in the good. And again, when we know it's good, when we know it's the right thing to do, okay, not something out of duty, but the thing that we just know is the right thing to do. So when we lean into love, or we do something good for another person, or do something good in this season, even though we're filled with fear and doubt, both can live in the same space. Absolutely. Sometimes grace just lifts it and we have this supernatural kind of strength and power to do it. Sometimes not. It's like we're doing it anyway, and there's this line in the middle of us, and on the one side we believe and we're doing it and it's good, and on the other side we're feeling what we're feeling. It's an amazing thing, and the best way I can describe it is that it's a complete embracing of both things. There's tension there, but it's a complete embracing of both sides. In this time of Passover and Easter, we actually experience the reality of this new world we find ourselves in today. And we can't really make sense of it. But we know God is. There's a wonderful poet by the name of Rainier Maria Rilke, and he wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and learn to love the questions themselves." And isn't this true, Aaron, that this is where grace comes from too? Being patient with yourself. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and learn to love the questions themselves. So good. So, what is the resurrection of the Messiah about? Among many things, Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crowson wrote a book on the last week of Jesus titled The Last Week, and it touches on some of the Easter's experiences significance. And they write that when Yeshua lives means that he, and I'm quoting now, is a figure of the present, not simply of the past. This is big. He's a figure of the present, not simply of the past. The Spirit, the presence, his followers knew in him before his death continues to be known. And by the way, that's a reason why some people feel like Thomas wanted to touch where the scars was, because they wanted to know that even though he's come back, that he still identifies with the humanity that he walked in, meaning he still identifies with us. So this holds a call for us personally and community. The way communally, the way of Yeshua after resurrection, according to Borg and Crowson, is sharing his passion, and I'm going to quote again, for the kingdom of God, what life would be like on earth if God were king, and the rulers, domination systems, and empires of this world were not. It is the world the prophets dreamed of, a world of distributive justice in which everyone has enough and systems are fair. This is God's dream that can only be realized by being grounded ever more deeply in the reality of God, whose heart is justice. End of quote. One of the messages in resurrection that they're pointing out is that God's people, even in death, cannot be stopped. Thomas Long describes the new way things are in the light of resurrection. And I'm quoting, the way the world used to be, if something troubling got in the way, like a call for racial justice or a worker for peace or an advocate for mercy, the world could just kill it and it would be done with. But Jesus is alive, and righteousness, mercy, and peace cannot be dismissed with a cross or a sword. End of quote. This is one of the great messages in resurrection. The cause, the mission, cannot be stopped. This resurrection moves us both to worship and to doubt. And now more than ever, we really live in the tension of those two. But in that tension, there is nothing we cannot do. Move mountains, banish fear. And by the way, just our presence when we talk to someone, have a video chat with them, just our face and our voice and our spirit can help people to move out of fear. Love our enemies, change the world. And the text says, and he is with us always. There are places right now where literal death seems at its worst. But it may very well be where God is making a new way of life. A place where we worship and acknowledge doubt in the exact same space. And that's where we are our most powerful. Such a thing is not about our human capacity for good. It's actually about God's decisive choice for his good through us. The fact that he can work in the tension of this doubt and worship. His infinite capacity and resurrection love right in the midst of our tension. So I want to encourage you, embrace it, say it, own it, and then do. We're going to close this time with the lighting of the Shabbos candles, which connect us so brilliantly with the light of peace, of joy, and of unity. Blessing and honor, glory and power be unto him now and forever. As we say together in our worship and our doubts, He is risen. Shabbat Shalom.